Have you ever wondered why some people carry a kind of knowing that seems to exist before memory? Why certain individuals walk into rooms already reading the emotional temperature before anyone speaks? There's a psychological truth hiding in plain sight: empaths who were not emotionally protected. As children developed traits that look like gifts but began as something else entirely. Something necessary. Something that saved them. Carl Jung spent his life studying the architecture of the human psyche, and what he discovered changes how we understand sensitivity itself. He wrote that the psyche never forgets what it needed but couldn't find. It doesn't just remember the absence. It transforms around it. It builds new capacities where protection should have been. There's an alertness in you that never fully turns off. Not panic, not fear. Just a quiet readiness that lives beneath everything else you do. You feel it when you enter a space and immediately sense who's uncomfortable. You notice it when someone's tone shifts by half a degree, and your body registers the change before your mind catches up. You track silences. You measure distances. You anticipate reactions. And you don't remember learning any of this. You only know it's always been there. Even now, in moments when you should feel safe, part of you is still scanning, still tracking, still listening for what isn't being said. You've called it intuition. You've called it sensitivity. You've called it just who you are. But sometimes in the quiet hours, a different question surfaces. Why does rest feel like something you have to earn? Why does calm carry its own kind of tension? Why doesn't safety always register as safety? You can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone. Not isolated, unseen. There's a strange contradiction there. You're exceptionally good at understanding others. You pick up on moods quickly. You adapt without thinking. Yet when it comes to yourself, something always feels postponed. Like you're perpetually a step behind your own needs. Like tending to yourself is something you'll get to later after everyone else is okay. You learned early how to stay quiet, how to not add to the noise, how to make yourself small enough that your presence didn't create disruption. Not because someone told you to, because it felt necessary. You remember watching faces closely, listening carefully, trying to anticipate reactions before they happened. That vigilance didn't feel like effort back then. It felt like survival. You learned how to read a room before you ever learned how to relax inside one. And that skill followed you everywhere. Into friendships, into relationships, into every space where connection was supposed to feel natural. People often describe you as mature, wise beyond your years, grounded. They don't see the cost of that grounding. They don't feel how quickly your energy shifts when emotions rise around you, how instinctively you move toward stabilizing things, how rarely you wait for someone to stabilize you. You've noticed how uncomfortable you feel when someone asks, "What do you need?" The question catches you off guard, not because you don't have needs you do, but naming them feels risky, dangerous even, so you hesitate, you deflect. You say you're fine, and in many ways you are. You function well. You handle responsibility. You stay composed when others fall apart. But there's a subtle fatigue beneath it all. A tiredness that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from never fully letting go. From maintaining a kind of control that keeps you upright, but never allows you to rest. You notice how quickly you sense emotional undercurrents. How easily you pick up tension that others miss. How your body reacts before words are spoken. And you also notice how often you dismiss your own reactions. You tell yourself you're overthinking, that you're being too sensitive, that you should let things go. You've been doing that for as long as you can remember. Letting things go before they ever had a chance to land. Jung understood something about this that most people miss. He called these patterns complexes, wounds that become lenses. A complex isn't just a hurt. It's a way of seeing the world that forms around the hurt. And once formed, it doesn't disappear just because circumstances change. It becomes part of your psychological architecture, part of how you navigate everything. You rarely ask for comfort directly, not because you don't want it, you do, but you don't trust it to arrive when you need it. So you became self-sufficient, not proudly, quietly. You learned how to sit with discomfort without showing it, how to process internally instead of reaching outward, how to stay functional even when something feels off. Others admire this about you. They see strength. They see resilience. They don't see the isolation that comes with it. They don't see how difficult it is to fully relax in relationships, how part of you stays alert even in moments of closeness, how you anticipate disappointment before it happens. You don't expect much. Expectation feels dangerous, so you keep your hopes measured, your emotions contained, your needs minimal. You've told yourself this is maturity, or realism, or independence. And maybe it is. But sometimes in quieter moments, another question surfaces. Why did I learn to carry so much on my own? Why does relying on others feel unnatural? Why does emotional closeness sometimes feel heavier than distance? You don't have answers yet, only patterns. You notice how you're drawn to people who need support, how you instinctively take on the role of listener, how you rarely feel comfortable being the one held. When someone tries to get close to your inner world, you feel exposed, not seen exposed, as if something essential might be taken or misunderstood. So you keep layers. You share selectively. You reveal gradually. You stay in control of what others can access. That control doesn't feel manipulative. It feels protective. You're often told you're strong. But strength wasn't a choice. It was a response. And responses learned early have a way of becoming invisible. What you're beginning to sense, what Jung spent his life illuminating, is that the traits people admire in you didn't form in comfort. They formed in absence. In the space where emotional protection should have been something else, grew. Something intelligent, something adaptive, but also something that carries weight. You didn't learn how to be comforted. You learned how to cope. You didn't learn how to rest inside connection. You learned how to remain steady within uncertainty. And now, years later, those lessons still shape how you move through the world. You feel safest when you're the one who understands, when you're the one who notices, when you're the one who stays composed. But being that person all the time comes at a cost you don't usually acknowledge, because acknowledging it would require stopping. And stopping has never felt like an option. Yet something is shifting. You're starting to notice the gap between how capable you appear and how alone that capability can feel. You're beginning to sense that the traits people admire, the ones that make you exceptional at holding space for others, didn't emerge from strength. They emerged from necessity, from a child who had to become something before they were ready. And somewhere beneath all of that awareness, a question waits. What exactly did you learn to become when no one was there to hold the emotional weight for you? To understand what happened, we need to go back to a version of you that existed before language. Before you had words for what you were feeling. There was a child who learned to protect everyone except themselves. Jung wrote about the wounded child archetype, the part of us that carries the imprint of what we needed but didn't receive. This isn't metaphor. This is the psyche recording reality. When a child needs emotional protection and it's absent, something profound happens. The psyche doesn't just note the absence. It reorganizes itself around the gap. Imagine a tree growing next to a fence. If the fence stays there long enough, the tree grows around it, incorporates it, carries the shape of that obstacle even after the fence is removed. Your psyche did something similar. It grew around the absence of emotional protection. And now, years later, you still carry that shape. You became the child who learned to read your parents' mood before they walked through the door, who knew when to be quiet, when to be helpful, when to disappear, not because you were told these things explicitly, but because your survival, your emotional survival, depended on getting it right. This is where empaths and childhood intersect in ways most people don't understand. Empathy isn't just a personality trait you were born with. For many, it's a survival skill that developed under pressure. When the outer world offers no protection, the inner world builds fortresses. And those fortresses are made of perception. You learn to feel what others felt before they expressed it, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to manage emotions that weren't even yours. This wasn't a gift given freely. This was a capacity developed because it was necessary. Because unpredictability required vigilance. Because chaos needed someone to stay upright. Jung called this compensation the psyche's intelligent response to imbalance. When something is missing externally, the psyche generates it internally. When emotional protection wasn't available from others, you learned to protect yourself. But here's what's crucial: you also learned to protect everyone around you. To become the person who stabilizes, who soothes, who holds. And once that role became yours, it didn't matter if circumstances changed. The pattern remained. The complex formed. You became the empath who carries everyone's emotional weather while rarely checking your own forecast. Think about what you actually learned. You learned that your emotions were secondary to maintaining peace, that your needs could wait, that expressing vulnerability might add to an already fragile situation. So you developed extraordinary emotional awareness, not of yourself, but of everyone else. You became fluent in reading micro-expressions, tone shifts, energy changes. You developed what felt like a sixth sense. But what you were really developing was hypervigilance, disguised as intuition. The ability to track threat, disguised as empathy. Self-abandonment disguised as maturity. This is the psychological truth that most discussions about empath traits miss entirely. The sensitivity isn't the problem. The sensitivity is brilliant. What's difficult is how that sensitivity formed. It formed in the absence of safety. It formed when a child had to become their own emotional guardian before they even understood what emotions were. You became exceptional at holding others because no one held you. You became skilled at emotional regulation because no one helped you regulate. You became independent because dependence felt dangerous. And all of this happened so early, so automatically, that you don't remember choosing it. You only remember it always being this way. Jung understood that the psyche develops its greatest gifts in its deepest wounds. But he also understood the cost. The gift and the wound exist together. You can't separate them. Your extraordinary perception came from needing to predict danger. Your emotional intelligence came from having to manage what should have been managed for you. Your strength came from having no other option. Here's where the awakening begins. What if the distance people sometimes perceive in you isn't coldness? What if it's not indifference or detachment? What if it's actually the presence of self-containment learned when emotional protection wasn't available? When emotions rise around you now, something in you tightens. Not to shut down, to hold steady. You become quieter, more contained, less expressive. From the outside, that looks like withdrawal. But internally, you're working harder than anyone realizes. You're managing layers. Your reaction, their reaction, the possible outcomes of both. This is where the misunderstanding lives. People assume that being less expressive means feeling less, that staying composed means being untouched. But you feel everything. You just learned very early that feeling openly wasn't always safe. So instead of expressing emotion, you organized it. You learned how to carry intensity without letting it spill. That skill didn't come from confidence. It came from necessity. And what looks like emotional distance now is not the absence of attachment. It's the presence of self-containment. You're not stepping away because you don't care. You're stepping inward because you've learned that stability starts there. This realization is unsettling because it reframes everything. The traits you developed, the ones people praise, the ones you've built your identity around, weren't signs of resilience chosen freely. They were adaptations formed under conditions that demanded them. You became observant because unpredictability required it. You became self-reliant because support wasn't consistent. You became calm because chaos needed someone to stay upright. And once those traits formed, they didn't disappear when circumstances improved. They became your identity, your way of being in the world, your psychological signature. But here's what Jung knew that changes everything. These adaptations are real, they're intelligent, they served you, and they came at a cost. Both things can be true simultaneously. You can honor what saved you while also recognizing what it cost you, what it still costs you. If this is resonating with you, if you're seeing your own patterns in this, leave a comment below. Share one trait everyone admires about you that you know came from something harder. You're not alone in this. What you're beginning to understand is that empaths who were not emotionally protected as children often develop traits that look like strength but function as armor. They don't collapse easily. They don't depend readily. They don't expect others to hold them. They hold themselves. That self-holding is impressive. It's also heavy. It means you rarely experience the relief of being fully met. It means you often feel safest when you're the most composed person in the room. It means closeness can feel threatening, not because of fear, but because it asks you to release control you learned to keep. You don't lean back easily. You don't let yourself be fully seen all at once. Not because you're guarded, because exposure once meant vulnerability without protection. So your system learned to pace connection carefully. That pacing can look like emotional distance, but it's actually discernment shaped by experience. You know how quickly depth can turn into overwhelm, how easily openness can become obligation. You know the cost of being uncontained in spaces that can't hold you. So you stay precise. You offer empathy without surrender, presence without collapse, care without dependence. And that balance is rare. It's also lonely. Because people who haven't lived this way often don't know how to meet you. They expect more expression, more need, more openness. They don't realize that your quiet strength came from learning to survive without emotional shelter. You didn't grow strong because you were protected. You grew strong because you weren't. And that truth changes everything about how you understand yourself. It doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're damaged. It means your nervous system, though steady, though capable, never learned what it feels like to fully rest in another person. So you rest alone. Not because you prefer isolation, because it's where your body finally exhales. This isn't comforting, it's clarifying. Because once you see it, you can't unsee how much you've carried. How early you learned to manage what others were supposed to help you hold. And how that shaped your empathy into something disciplined rather than soft. You're not fragile, but you are tired in a way few people notice. Tired of always being the strong one. Tired of being the emotional anchor. Tired of holding without being held. And yet, even now, if the idea of letting go feels unfamiliar. What you're sitting with is this: the traits you developed were intelligent responses to emotional neglect psychology. Your strength is real. The cost is real. Both exist together. And maybe the most important question isn't how do I become softer? Maybe it's something much quieter. Who would you be if you no longer had to hold everything alone? Jung spent decades studying what he called the persona, the mask we show to the world. For most people, the persona is a necessary interface, a way to navigate social life without exposing everything. But for empaths who grew up without emotional protection, the persona became something else. It became a fortress. You learned to be who others needed you to be before you learned who you actually were. That's not an exaggeration. Think about it. You learned to read your environment and adjust yourself accordingly before you ever had space to discover your own authentic responses. Your persona, the capable, calm, perceptive version of yourself, wasn't built gradually. It was constructed rapidly under pressure as a form of protection. And here's what's difficult to acknowledge. That persona works. It keeps you safe. It earns you respect. It makes you valuable to others. But beneath it, something else exists. Jung called it the self, the totality of who you are beyond the mask. And for you, the self has been waiting, still carrying the experiences the persona was built to cover, still holding the needs that were never met, still longing for the protection that never came. The distance people sometimes perceive isn't you being cold. It's you protecting the parts of yourself no one ever protected. The parts that learned very early that showing up fully could be dangerous, that needing openly might add burden, that vulnerability without protection is just exposure. So you developed layers, concentric circles of access. People meet your persona first, the composed, capable version. Very few reach the self. And even when they do, part of you stays alert, monitoring, making sure it's safe, making sure you can pull back if needed. This is the psychological architecture of the unprotected psyche. Strong on the outside, guarded on the inside. Not because of distrust necessarily, but because the system learned that protection doesn't come from others. It comes from maintaining control, from staying contained, from never fully releasing into anyone else's care. And this architecture has a specific structure Jung would recognize immediately. It's built on what he called a complex and emotionally charged cluster of ideas, feelings, and memories that operates semi-autonomously. Your unprotected empath complex has three core components that reinforce each other continuously. First, there's hypervigilance. Your system stays alert for emotional shifts in others, constantly scanning, constantly tracking. This isn't paranoia. It's learned prediction. You developed the ability to sense changes before they fully manifest because early detection meant early adaptation, and early adaptation meant safety. Second, there's self-abandonment. Your needs get perpetually postponed because attending to them once felt more dangerous than ignoring them. Every time you chose to manage someone else's emotions instead of your own, you reinforced a pattern. Every time you stayed quiet when you needed to speak, you taught yourself that your inner world was secondary. Third, there's compulsive caretaking. You don't just help people when asked. You anticipate their needs before they express them. You move toward emotional instability automatically like a heat-seeking missile. Not because you're naturally generous, though you may be. Because stabilizing others became how you stabilized yourself. These three elements form a closed loop. Hypervigilance identifies emotional need in others. Self-abandonment makes space for their need by suppressing yours. Compulsive caretaking fulfills their need, which temporarily reduces your anxiety. And then the cycle repeats, over and over, until you can't remember what it feels like to simply be present without this entire system running in the background. Jung's principle of compensation explains what happened next. The psyche always seeks balance. When something is missing, it generates an internal equivalent. When emotional protection was absent in your childhood, your psyche compensated. It developed extraordinary sensitivity to others' emotions so you could predict and prevent danger. It created rigid self-sufficiency since dependence felt unsafe. It built elaborate internal regulation systems since external regulation wasn't available. This wasn't pathology. This was genius adaptation. Your psyche did exactly what it needed to do to keep you safe. The problem is that what saved you as a child may be limiting you as an adult. The same mechanisms that protected you then now prevent the closeness you actually want. The same independence that kept you safe now keeps you isolated. The same emotional precision that helped you survive now makes it difficult to simply feel without analyzing. Think about it like this. Imagine a tree growing on a windswept cliff. To survive, it grows dense low with a strong root system that grips the rock. That adaptation is brilliant for that environment. But if you transplant that tree to a sheltered valley where it could grow tall and wide, it doesn't automatically change. It continues growing in the same compressed pattern. Not because it needs to anymore. Because that's the shape it learned, that's the structure it built. You are that tree. The environment has changed. You're no longer the child without protection. But the shape remains. The patterns persist. The hypervigilance continues even when there's no current threat. The self-sufficiency holds even when support is available. The emotional containment maintains even in moments of safety. And here's what makes this particularly complex. These patterns don't feel like problems to you. They feel like your personality, like who you are. You might even take pride in them. Your independence, your emotional intelligence, your ability to handle anything. People celebrate these qualities in you. They don't see, and you rarely acknowledge, that they were born from necessity, not preference. This is what Jung meant when he talked about how the psyche tricks us. It takes survival adaptations and integrates them so seamlessly into our identity that we can't separate who we are from what we had to become. The mask becomes the face. The adaptation becomes the self-concept. And challenging these patterns feels like threatening your very existence. This is where Jung's concept of the collective unconscious becomes relevant. You're not just healing your wound. You're healing an ancestral pattern. Some of what you carry isn't even yours. It's inherited, passed down through generations of people who also learned to survive without emotional safety, who also developed these same adaptations. Empaths often inherit unprocessed family emotion. You became the one who feels what others couldn't process, who carries what others avoided, who stabilizes what previous generations left unstable. The parentified child who becomes the family's emotional processor, not by choice, by necessity, by the intelligence of a system seeking balance. Understanding this doesn't erase your experience. It gives it context. It reduces shame, because you begin to see that your hypervigilance, your self-sufficiency, your emotional containment, these aren't character flaws. They're survival strategies. They're intelligent responses to impossible conditions. And they worked. They got you here. They kept you alive and functional. But there's a cost you're only now beginning to count. You're tired of being the person everyone leans on when you're not sure how to lean. You're exhausted from holding space for others, while your own emotional needs stay perpetually postponed. You're weary of the loneliness that comes from being the most self-sufficient person in every room. And this is where the crisis of individuation begins. Individuation, Jung's term for becoming who you truly are, requires a painful awakening for people like you. It requires recognizing that your strength is compensation, not just nature. It requires seeing how you've abandoned yourself in the act of protecting others. It requires feeling the grief of what you didn't receive. And the resistance to this is enormous, because acknowledging it feels dangerous. It challenges your identity. If you're not the strong one, the capable one, the one who holds everything together, then who are you? If you admit that you need protection, support, care, does that mean you've been weak all along? Does it mean everything you've built is false? No. It means You're finally ready to become whole instead of just functional. It means you're ready to integrate what was split, to reclaim what was exiled, to bring the self out from behind the persona's fortress. But you cannot become whole while still living from the wound. You cannot individuate while maintaining the same patterns that formed in trauma. Something has to shift. Something has to soften. Something has to let go. And this is terrifying, because letting go feels like losing control. And control has been your primary source of safety for as long as you can remember. But Jung understood something crucial. The psyche always moves toward wholeness. Even when you resist, even when you're afraid, even when you don't know how, your psyche is calling you home. Back to the parts of yourself you had to exile to survive. Back to the needs you learned to suppress. Back to the vulnerability you learned to hide. Back to the child who needed protection and never received it. Not to stay in that pain, but to finally offer what was missing. The question that changes everything is this: who would you be if protection had been present, not to create regret, not to dwell in what didn't happen, but to illuminate possibility, to show you that the traits you developed are real and they came at a cost, that you can honor what saved you while also choosing something different now, because you're not that child anymore. You have resources now you didn't have then. You have awareness. You have choice. You have the capacity to give yourself what wasn't given, to become the protector you needed, to reparent the wounded parts that still wait for someone to notice they're there. This is the turning point, the moment when you realize that healing isn't about becoming less sensitive or less perceptive or less empathic. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that got buried under the weight of everyone else's emotions. It's about learning to protect yourself first so you can show up for others authentically instead of compulsively. Jung believed the psyche always moves toward wholeness. Your inner transformation has already begun. You're already sensing that something needs to change. You're already feeling the weight of patterns that no longer serve you. You're already hearing the quiet call toward a different way of being. The question is whether you're ready to answer it. Integration begins with meeting what you've been avoiding. Jung called it shadow work, the process of encountering and reclaiming the parts of yourself you had to exile to survive. For empaths who grew up without protection, the shadow isn't filled with darkness or evil. It's filled with needs, with vulnerability, with the right to be held. Your shadow contains everything you had to suppress to stay safe. Your needs buried because they felt dangerous. Your anger suppressed because conflict felt threatening. Your vulnerability hidden because exposure felt risky. Your right to receive denied because giving felt safer. These aren't bad parts of you. They're essential parts that were deemed too costly to express. And now they wait. In the shadow. In the parts of yourself you don't usually acknowledge. And the way you know they're there is by noticing what you judge in others. When you feel irritation at someone for being too needy, that's your exiled need speaking. When you feel uncomfortable around someone who expresses anger freely, that's your suppressed anger calling attention to itself. When you judge someone for being weak or dependent, that's the part of you that had to be strong and independent trying to maintain its position. Here's a specific example of how this works. Imagine you're watching someone at work ask for help repeatedly. Something in you tightens. Maybe you think, why can't they figure this out themselves? Or they're being so demanding. That reaction isn't really about them. It's about you. It's your system protecting the rule you learned: don't ask, don't need, don't burden others. Or notice what happens when someone cries easily in front of you. Do you feel compassion, or do you feel a subtle discomfort, maybe even a quiet judgment that they're being too emotional or making it dramatic? That's your exiled vulnerability speaking. The part of you that had to stay composed, that couldn't afford to fall apart, that learned crying was unsafe. The shadow isn't just about recognizing these judgments. It's about understanding that what you judge in others is what you've banished in yourself. And you can't integrate what you won't acknowledge. You can't reclaim what you continue to exile. Shadow work isn't about becoming someone different. It's about becoming whole. It's about integrating what was split. And for you, that means learning to allow what you've spent a lifetime controlling. It means practicing the very things that feel most unnatural. Expressing needs, showing vulnerability, receiving without immediately reciprocating, being seen in your mess instead of just your competence. This is uncomfortable. Your entire system was organized around not doing these things. So when you try, resistance arises. Your body tenses, your mind generates reasons why this isn't necessary. Your persona reasserts itself. I'm fine, it says. I don't need help. I can handle this alone. And you can. That's the problem. You've been handling things alone for so long that you're exceptionally good at it. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you've developed the capacity to function without support doesn't mean that's how you're meant to live. The practice begins small. Start with awareness. Notice when you automatically move toward caretaking and ask yourself, is this genuine care or compulsive compensation? Notice when someone offers help and you deflect. Notice when you judge others for expressing needs you won't let yourself have. Notice the patterns without trying to change them yet. Just notice. Then begin experimenting. Ask for something small from someone you trust, not a test, not a way to prove they'll fail you. A genuine experiment in letting yourself need. Notice what happens in your body when you do this. Notice the fear. Notice the resistance. Notice the voice that says, this is dangerous, this is too much, this will burden them. And then notice what actually happens. Most of the time, people want to help. They want to support you. They've been waiting for you to let them. The danger you learn to anticipate often doesn't arrive. And when it does, you now have adult resources to handle it. You're not the child who had to survive alone anymore. This is where reparenting becomes crucial. You must give yourself what wasn't given, not metaphorically, literally. You must become the protective presence you needed. You must speak to the younger version of yourself that learned to be vigilant and say, you don't have to watch anymore. I'm here now. I'll handle this. You can rest. Jung used something called active imagination, a practice of dialoguing with the different parts of yourself. Try this. In a quiet moment, imagine the version of you that learned to scan for danger. See them clearly. Notice how young they are. Notice how tired they are. Notice how much they've been carrying. And then speak to them, not from your adult persona, from your adult self. Tell them they did well. Tell them their vigilance kept you safe. Tell them they can stop now. Tell them you've got this. Tell them protection is no longer their responsibility. This isn't just visualization, this is rewiring. Every time you do this, you're offering your nervous system new information. You're teaching your body that safety doesn't require constant vigilance. You're practicing what it feels like to be protected instead of always protecting. The transformation from hypervigilance to conscious awareness happens slowly. Hypervigilance is fear-based, automatic, compulsive. Conscious awareness is choice-based, intentional, selective. You don't have to lose your perceptiveness. You're recalibrating when and how you use it. Start asking yourself different questions. Am I scanning for danger or genuinely connecting right now? Is this my intuition or my trauma speaking? Am I responding to what's actually happening or what I learned to anticipate? Practice grounding techniques that signal safety to your nervous system. Place your hand on your heart. Feel your feet on the ground. Take a breath that's longer on the exhale than the inhale. These aren't just relaxation techniques. They're messages to your body that right now in this moment, you're safe. The danger you learn to watch for isn't present. The goal isn't to stop being aware. It's to choose when to attune to others instead of being compelled to. It's to differentiate between genuine intuition and habitual hypervigilance. It's to trust that you can notice emotional undercurrents without taking responsibility for them. This brings us to the most difficult part: learning to let people in. Rebuilding trust and connection after spending years protecting yourself from it. This is where Jung's transcendent function becomes relevant, the capacity to hold two opposing truths simultaneously without collapsing into either extreme. You can protect yourself and let others close. You can be self-sufficient and receive support. You can be strong and vulnerable. These aren't contradictions. They're integration. They're wholeness. They're what happens when the persona and the self finally stop fighting and start cooperating. Start small. You don't have to trust everyone. Choose someone who's proven themselves trustworthy and practice letting them see you in small doses. Share something you'd normally keep to yourself. Ask for help with something you'd usually handle alone. Let yourself be imperfect, uncertain, not entirely composed in their presence. And when they respond with care instead of judgment, let that land. Let it register. Let it become evidence that maybe possibly connection doesn't always equal danger. That vulnerability doesn't always lead to abandonment. That needing doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Practice asking for what you need, even when it feels impossible, even when every fiber of your being wants to say, "I'm fine." Especially then, because every time you express a need and it's met, you're rewriting the story your nervous system learned. You're teaching your body that support can be reliable, that you don't have to do everything alone. Understanding that receiving doesn't make you weak, it makes you whole. This is crucial. Your strength isn't diminished by accepting help. Your strength becomes sustainable because you're no longer running solely on your own resources. You're learning to draw from connection, from community, from the support that was always available but you never let yourself access. The new belief you're building is this: connection is not a threat to my safety. Isolation is. The real danger isn't being seen. It's staying hidden. It isn't needing. It's the chronic denial of needs. It isn't vulnerability. It's the exhaustion of maintaining invulnerability. Individuation becomes a daily practice, not a destination, not something you achieve and then you're done. It's a continuous becoming, a constant recommitment to choosing wholeness over the familiar patterns of protection. What does this look like practically? It looks like checking in with yourself before checking on others. It looks like honoring your needs as valid, not negotiable. It looks like letting yourself be imperfect, messy, not always composed. It looks like practicing saying, "I don't know," and "I need help," without immediately explaining or apologizing. It looks like celebrating small moments of vulnerability, like noticing when you share something real and the world doesn't collapse, like recognizing when you ask for help and people show up, like feeling the subtle relief that comes when you finally let someone else hold something you've been carrying alone. The shift is from performing strength to embodying authenticity, from compulsive capability to chosen responsibility, from armor to boundaries, from isolation to selective intimacy. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small moments of courage, in tiny experiments with trust, in gradual expansion of what feels safe. And it happens imperfectly. You'll still default to old patterns. You'll still catch yourself managing everyone's emotions except your own. You'll still feel the pull towards self-sufficiency even when support is available. That's not failure. That's the reality of changing patterns that formed when your brain was still developing. Be patient with yourself. You're not just changing behaviors. You're changing the underlying architecture of how you relate to yourself and others. You're rewiring a nervous system that learned to survive alone. You're teaching a psyche that protection can come from connection, not just control. This is Jungian psychology in practice. Not just theory, not just intellectual understanding. Actual transformation through integration, through shadow work, through reparenting, through the daily choice to honor all of yourself instead of just the parts that keep you safe. You're learning to live from wholeness instead of compensation, from authenticity instead of adaptation, from the self instead of just the persona. And that changes everything. So who are you becoming? Not who you were, not who you had to be, who you're choosing to be now that you understand what formed you. You're becoming someone who is still empathic, but boundaried, still perceptive, but not responsible for managing everyone's emotional reality, still caring, but including yourself in that care. This isn't about losing your sensitivity. It's about reclaiming your energy. It's about being selective with your empathy instead of compulsively available. You're integrating what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold both your strength and your need without collapsing into either extreme. Your sensitivity is a gift. Your self-abandonment was a survival strategy. You can keep one and release the other. They were never the same thing. You just learned to conflate them because they developed together. Here's what Jung knew that most people miss. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. That's not just an inspirational quote. It's a psychological truth. Your past shaped you, undeniably, profoundly. But it doesn't have to determine you. You can honor what you learned while choosing something different now. The vision of your future self isn't about perfection. It's about integration. It's about what becomes possible when you stop living from the wound and start living from wholeness. Imagine entering rooms without immediately scanning for emotional threat. Not because you've lost your awareness, because you've learned to trust your boundaries to protect you instead of your hypervigilance. You're still perceptive. You're just not compulsively vigilant. Imagine resting without guilt. Actually resting. Not productive rest, where you're still managing things in your mind. True rest, where your nervous system finally exhales because it knows you're safe. Where stopping doesn't feel like abandonment. Where doing nothing doesn't create anxiety. Imagine receiving care without immediately reciprocating. Letting someone see you struggling and not having to pretend you're fine. Accepting help without keeping score. Being held without having to earn it through your usefulness. This feels almost unimaginable right now. But it's possible. It's what happens when you integrate the parts of yourself that learned receiving was dangerous. Imagine trusting your boundaries to protect you, not needing to stay contained and controlled to feel safe. Knowing you can be open and protected, vulnerable and boundaried, available and autonomous. The integration of opposites isn't contradiction, it's wholeness. Imagine letting yourself be fully seen, not the curated version, not the capable persona, the actual you, messy, uncertain, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes not okay. And discovering that you are still worthy of connection, still deserving of care, still fundamentally valuable even when you're not performing strength. This doesn't mean you lose your depth. It means you finally get to live in it without drowning. Your capacity for emotional understanding doesn't disappear. It becomes sustainable because you're no longer using it to abandon yourself. You're using it to connect authentically. And here's the part that matters beyond your individual healing. Your transformation creates permission for others. When you start honoring your needs, other empaths notice. When you start setting boundaries, you show them it's possible. When you let yourself be imperfect, you give them permission to be human. Your healing doesn't just change you, it ripples outward. It affects the people around you. It breaks patterns that might have continued for generations. Every empath who learns to protect themselves first teaches the next generation something different. That strength doesn't require self-abandonment. That empathy doesn't demand self-sacrifice. That you can care deeply without losing yourself. You were children who protected everyone. You're becoming adults who protect yourselves first, not selfishly, but wisely. So you can show up for others from overflow instead of depletion, from choice instead of compulsion, from authenticity instead of obligation. This is the collective transformation Jung envisioned. Not just individual healing, but collective evolution. When enough people integrate their shadows, when enough people individuate, when enough people choose wholeness over adaptation, the entire system shifts. You're part of that shift. Your healing matters beyond just you. But the journey continues beyond this awareness. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to integrate everything today. You just need to take one step. Ask yourself one question. Make one choice that honors the truth you're now seeing. Today, ask yourself, what would change if I believed I deserved protection? Not just as a concept, actually deserved it. The way a child deserves protection simply by existing. What would change in how you move through the world, how you show up in relationships, how you treat yourself when things get hard? You were never too much. The world was too small to hold you. The environments you grew up in couldn't contain your sensitivity. So you learned to compress yourself, to become manageable, to fit into spaces that weren't designed for someone who feels as deeply as you do. But you're not in those spaces anymore. You're an adult now with choices your younger self didn't have. You can create environments that honor your depth. You can choose relationships with people who can hold your fullness. You can build a life where your sensitivity is respected, not something you have to apologize for. Now you're learning to hold yourself, and that changes everything. Because once you become the protector you stop looking for it in places that can't provide it. You stop abandoning yourself to maintain connection. You stop performing to earn care. You start showing up as you are and trusting that's enough. This is what Jung meant by individuation. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For you, that means becoming the one who finally protects the child you were, who honors the needs you had to suppress, who integrates the parts you had to exile, who lives from wholeness instead of compensation. You're not broken. You never were. You're a person who developed brilliant adaptations to impossible conditions. Those adaptations served you. They kept you alive. They made you exceptionally capable. And they came at a cost. Both things are true. You can honor what saved you, while also releasing what no longer serves you. The Carl Jung empath understands something essential. That sensitivity without protection becomes hypervigilance. That empathy without boundaries becomes depletion. That caring for others while abandoning yourself is not virtue, it's survival strategy that's outlived its usefulness. You're learning something new now. How to be empathic and boundaried, perceptive and self-protective, caring and self-honoring. This is integration. This is wholeness. This is what becomes possible when you stop living from the wound and start living from the self. Your quiet strength was never weakness. It was the strongest thing you could have been given the circumstances. But you don't have to prove your strength anymore. You don't have to earn your right to exist by being useful. You don't have to stay contained to be safe. You can be exactly as much as you are. Feel as deeply as you feel. Need as much as you need. And still be worthy of protection, care, connection, not because you've earned it, because you exist, because you're human, because you always deserved what you didn't receive. This is your inner transformation. From the child who protected everyone to the adult who protects themselves. From compulsive empathy to chosen compassion. From survival to authenticity. From the wound to the self. You're becoming who you always were beneath the adaptations. And that person, the real you, has been waiting for this moment, waiting to be seen, to be protected, to be held, not by someone else first, by you. Welcome home. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear what's shifting for you. Share in the comments. What trait did everyone admire about you that you now see came from survival, not choice? And subscribe for more psychology content that helps you understand yourself at the deepest levels. You're not broken. You're becoming. And that's the most human thing there is.